Here's a guy who thinks that atheists are not skeptics.
As you might know, many atheists claim to be skeptics. And it used to be almost a trend that atheists would call themselves skeptics and be like, oh, I'm an atheist because I'm a skeptic.
There's an interesting point to be made here in that when I say I'm a skeptic, I don't mean that I'm skeptical of every single claim that I hear. If I meet some guy for the first time and he says, "Hi, my name is Gary," I don't say, "Oh, really? Well, I'm skeptical of that." All I mean when I say that I'm a skeptic is that I look into a few more claims with a little bit more scrutiny than the average bear does.
And if you don't know what skeptic means, it basically just means a person who questions everything. Absolutely everything.
As Wittgenstein correctly pointed out, words mean what people use them to mean, and that's not what I use the word skeptic to mean.
And in this video, I'm gonna present to you why us being skeptics doesn't actually lead to atheism.
Oh, I agree that being a skeptic doesn't necessarily lead to atheism. The mere fact that you scrutinize a claim does not guarantee that you will scrutinize it competently.
And now I think the only logical place to start with is assuming that the atheist is correct. We should assume a world where there is no God.
I don't think a skeptic needs to assume that in order to be a skeptic. A skeptic would be more likely to simply ask whether there's a God and try to figure it out rather than assume that a God does or does not exist.
We should assume that the world is completely naturalistic like most atheists claim. And now let's be skeptics and see where we end up. And of course we should begin with the question that every skeptic should ask themselves. Why search for the truth?
Well, let's be specific about what we mean by the truth. When I claim that something is true, what I mean is that it consistently, falsifiably, and most parsimoniously predicts observation. This is different from the correspondence theory of truth, which says that a statement is true if it correctly matches noumenal reality. Noumenal reality is whatever reality exists beyond our senses. I don't care whether my beliefs correspond to reality as it exists independent of my sensory experiences, because I don't live beyond my sensory experiences. Maybe we're in the Matrix and all of our experiences are illusory. If we live in the Matrix, we still have to be able to get around in it, so even if everything is a simulation, my first priority is navigating the simulation. If knowing what goes on beyond the simulation doesn't help me predict my experiences within the simulation, then such knowledge is of no consequence to me.
Why care about the truth? Why believe in the truth?
If you define the truth as statements that match noumenal reality, then I don't care about the truth, because it's useless to me. Other than satisfying one's curiosity, there is absolutely nothing to be gained from pursuing knowledge of a truth that is of no consequence with respect to one's experiences.
You see, if we don't have an all-powerful being, an omnigod, which gives us an objective morality, which says that truth is good and we should pursue truth, then why should we pursue truth?
Even if we do have such a God who says that pursuing truth is good, there is still no objective, non-circular reason why we ought to do so, because there is no objective, non-circular reason why we ought to do what God says.
Why in this naturalistic world should we pursue truth? Why should we care about the truth?
I don't see any reason to pursue noumenal truth. With respect to the definition of truth that I use, I pursue it because having knowledge of such truths makes my life more enjoyable.
I mean, surely if everything's just atoms and quarks and so on, then it doesn't even matter what you believe.
Well, what I believe has consequences for my experience. For example, if I become convinced that I'm guaranteed to win a huge jackpot if I spend all my money at the casino, I'm probably going to have a very bad time.
And so the atheist must even answer this question, which might very well be impossible to answer within an atheistic worldview. Why search for the truth?
Because the kind of truth I search for makes my life a lot more enjoyable when I have it.
Why? Simply why? And now, if you believe that you have an answer to this, I would certainly want to hear it, because I do not have an answer to this. And if I do get a convincing answer to this, I might change my views, you know?
Well, again, that depends on what you mean by the truth. I pursue what I guess you could call phenomenological truths, and I do so because being in possession of such truths enhances the quality of my life. If you are looking for noumenal truths, then I really don't see any point to pursuing them beyond satisfying one's curiosity.
But now let's move on. Let's somehow once again assume that the atheist happens to be able to answer the question, oh yes, we need to search for the truth.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that you need to search for any kind of truth. If you don't care about consequences, if you don't care about how commodious your life is, then no kind of truth will be or should be of any use to you.
The truth does matter, and you should believe in the truth, even though most people would say that in an atheistic world there is no art statements. You cannot get an is from an art.
It's the other way around, actually. You can't get an ought from an is. But that's true even if there is a God. Even if there is a God who dictates morality to us, it does not and cannot follow that you ought to obey such a God.
David Hume's guillotine. And so, you can never make the statement, we ought to believe in the truth.
And I never would make any such statement.
But let's imagine that the atheist manages to answer this question, why we should search for the truth and why we should believe in the truth. One of the most common arguments against God is the problem of evil. And so the atheist says, look at the evil that is in the world. Surely there must not be a God. Surely there must not be a God that is all loving at least, or all powerful. Checkmate, theists. But once again, let's be skeptics. Let's assume that the atheist is correct and be skeptics. Well, we could just ask the question, what is evil?
Well, when I make that argument, I use the biblical definition of evil because the whole point of that argument is to show that God, if he exists, doesn't live up to his own standards. I don't need to have my own moral standards in order to point out when someone else isn't living up to theirs. I would never say that evil exists according to my own definition of evil because I have no such definition. I don't think there's any such thing as objective evil. There are things that are intolerable to my conscience, but that's entirely subjective.
I mean, what is evil? Can you define evil?
No, because it's a nonsensical concept.
Is evil pain? But why is pain evil? Is it because people don't like it? But why is something that we don't like evil?
Why is something that God doesn't like evil? If you define evil as anything God doesn't like, then evil becomes meaningless. If God exists and he commands you to do something, that thing is not evil no matter what it is. Sam Harris often tries to argue in favor of objective morality without appeal to God by saying, everyone agrees that the worst possible suffering for everyone is bad. This isn't true, though. Many theists would hold it to be the case that if God commanded us to inflict the worst possible suffering on everyone, then the worst possible suffering for everyone would be good simply by virtue of the fact that God commands it.
Once again, it seems to be a problem of infinite regression. And so, where do we end up? At some point you have to use circular logic, or you have to rely on a foundational axiom, a truth of the universe. And what else could that be except a God?
I don't see how a God would be any less circular. Why ought we do what God commands? I've heard some apologists argue that we ought to do what God commands because he created the universe, therefore he gets to make the rules. But what grounds this moral axiom? If it's true because God says so, then your argument is circular. If its truth is independent of God, then there is at least one example of a moral principle that can exist independent of God, and thus God is not, in fact, necessary to ground morality.
But hey, we're atheists and skeptics, right? So we cannot say that. Now let's assume that the atheist is correct once again. And let's think, what is evil? Well, surely there must be evil in the world because it just feels like it.
I don't believe that there is evil in the world. It feels like there are things that are intolerable to my conscience, but that's not the same as a feeling that those things are objectively wrong. I think a lot of people get these feelings mixed up, though, which I think contributes to the illusion of objective evil.
Well, why should we care about how we feel?
We don't have to. I do care, though, and I don't see a need for any further justification. I don't see why any of my cares require justification. I'm going to care about the things I care about, regardless of whether I objectively should.
Why should we trust our intuition? Why should we trust our feelings?
Well, I don't believe that we should trust them to convey noumenal truths to us. I don't care whether they convey such truths. If I'm in pain, I don't need pain to be objectively bad in order to try to alleviate it.
I mean, surely the atheist doesn't go to a theist and the theist says to the atheist that I have a feeling that God exists. The atheist would laugh.
I would also laugh if you were to say that you have a feeling that objective evil exists. To everyone who helps me out on Patreon, you're a big help. Thanks so much.